Greetings, family. Welcome back to the Learning Channel. Our topic today is making sense of the supremacist psychosis. I don't know where we are going to go and end up as we go down this black hole here, but we have to have an understanding to make sense out of the thinking of a people who claim to be superior, and they have collectively shown the world for more than 500 years that they are crazy. So what we see here in 2025, we cannot be surprised to see the manifestation of the supremacist psychosis. So when I say supremacist psychosis, kind of made up the term, but a simple definition: a collective delusional state of mind that persists over generations from the false notion that you are superior to others that do not look like you, feel like you, or experience life like you do. Mental conflict develops when the psychotic individual does not feel in control of a supreme reality. Simultaneously, the psychotic realizes on an unconscious level that their multiple internal fears must not be revealed. So in simplistic terms, people just go crazy. Do you remember this? One date, January 6, 2021. One date, January 8th, 2023. The psychosis went on a trailblaze. So your picture there on the left, that's the supremacist psychotic individuals storming the Congress, the Capitol in Washington, D.C. On the right, that's the Brazilian supremacist psychotic individuals storming Congress in Brazil. Copycats doing the same thing that the individuals in the United States did. In Brazil, they did the same thing. Both from presidents that claimed that the elections were rigged. So, in 2025, the supremacist psychosis. In Brazil's Independence Day, on Brazil's Independence Day, September 7, 2025, large street protests featuring an oversized U.S. flag sparked significant controversy. These demonstrations primarily represented Brazil's conservative factions. Now, I haven't read here conservative because it really means racist, who displayed the flag alongside Brazilian national symbols, symbolizing their alignment with the hard right, again, in red, hard right racist politics of both former President Bolsonaro and U.S. President Donald Trump. Conservative, again, racist. White man shot in Utah, September 10th, 2025. September 11th, 2025, former president of Brazil was convicted. Since these events, cancel culture has been on the prowl in 2025. In Brazil, can you believe they were actually flying a U.S. flag on their parade in Sao Paulo? So, as an undercurrent story on this, how did that gigantic flag even get there? Why would another country have another flag of that size? Well, you know, Kansas City Chiefs and Chargers played their first game there in Brazil for the 2005 NFL season. Was a flag left behind on purpose? You know, the Kansas City Chiefs are now 0-2. They might have a curse going on because, you know, the so-called commander-in-chief of the United States was there supporting that Kansas City Chief team, wanted them to win, but the Eagles came through. But the undercurrent of perhaps what's going on with a team in their politics, they got a black quarterback with a white wife who's supporting Trump. And you got this superstar entertainer who's now against Trump. So that Kansas City drama, it might be cursed, but the question is, there's an investigation now. Is the NFL involved in this scenario with a flag being left behind of that size in Brazil? Criminal elements and what justice looks like. So September 11th, as we said, Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro has been convicted of attempting a coup to stay in office after losing his re-election bid in 2022. I believe that happened in the United States also. 4 of the 5 justices on the Supreme Court panel voted to convict him Thursday and sentence him to 27 years and 3 months in prison. That's pretty deep. Not really deep if you just talk about the justice system doing what it's supposed to do. Prosecutors charged him with 5 crimes, including attempting a coup after losing the 2022 race to President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, participating in an armed criminal organization, attempted violent abolition of the democratic rule of law, damage qualified by violence, and deterioration of listed heritage. The same thing happened in the United States. For some reason, people's eyes were closed and they let that individual continue on. So how do we make sense? I'm saying making this make sense. So white man kills white man and HBCUs are threatened. For those who don't know what HBCUs are, because some of you may be in another country or even in this country and don't know, but historically, black colleges and universities are threatened after a white man kills another white man in a white state called Utah. Make that make sense. White man is convicted by the judicial system for attempting to overthrow the government, and the citizens are upset. Make that make sense. White man makes a living spouting hateful comments against people he does not like, and the U.S. flag is lowered to honor that person's life while in death. Make that make sense. In a democratic, and I have that in quotes, society, the white media assist in weaponizing a death to foster and promote a white man to be a dictator. So the one in death is the one that got shot. The one that wants to be a dictator is the current president. So the media is now fomenting and allowing this type of rhetoric to be espoused, and it creates a very tense society. So what are some things going on psychologically here? Or we're saying that some people have a supremacist psychosis. We have to look at defense mechanisms. One of them we can talk about is called projection. It's unconsciously attributing your unacceptable thoughts and feelings or motives to another person or group. So on a collective level, what we have is it's a them people. It's not us. And you saw that on display when that Utah governor said, I was hoping it wasn't one of us. What does that mean? You heard all the discussions now about what does that really mean? Again, it's that psychosis, the psychotic thinking that we're supreme. It couldn't be us killing one another. So you're projecting it. It's got to be them other people. So that's what happens in war. You project it like those other people, the bad people, and then you just get away with murder. Like what's happening in Gaza with the Palestinians and Israelis. What happened with Iraq and the United States saying, oh, Saddam Hussein is the bad guy. So you're projecting when you're the individual that's the problem. So projecting is a problem. Denial. Blocking external events from awareness. So you just basically lie, but denial. So in Brazil, so the guy tried to kill the president, tried to stage a coup. So that's wrong. You're now denying that that was an event that happened. So that's a problem. You're denying and you're acting like bad things didn't exist. Sublimation, diversion of an instinctual impulse into a culturally or socially more acceptable activity. It's just normal to be racist in America. For example, channeling anger into physical activity. So black schools, black people ain't got nothing to do with that white man killing that white man, but for some reason, let's go get them black people. Remember that book I told you about called Wilmington Lies? About what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina? The murderous coup of 1898 and the rise of white supremacy. One book. There's many books. This book is just talking about, written by David Zucchino, how white people did whatever they could to ensure that black people were not going to be running the governmental structure. Sublimation, channeling your anger into physical activity like violence. And then displacement, unconsciously redirecting unacceptable or dangerous impulses, feelings, or emotions from the original source of the new to a new, less threatening target. So White people ain't killing white people, although that happened. But now they redirect that attention rather than fighting others or fighting white people. They now go attack other people, brown people, because you see these world wars, these things are going on about brown people. These wars that are going on like Venezuela, it's about brown people. So displacement, you're unconsciously accepting an opportunity to go attack someone else. And so again, HBCU's got nothing to do with what happened in Utah. Not even in HBCUs on that side of the planet over there. So what is the narrative being weaponized? So history can be a weapon for your liberation. It can also be a weapon to control you. But look at this. There's a book by Jonathan Metzl called The Protest Psychosis. Look at the subtitle. How Schizophrenia Became a Black Disease. So the author is describing how it is that black people and all this protesting, all this quest for civil rights, and why are they doing all this? And they must be schizophrenic. Wow. So he's critiquing how this became a black disease when you start talking about relating this to protest. You must be crazy to want to keep protesting. White people can protest. It's fine. It's okay. So perhaps there's a new book title. I'm throwing it out there. So if someone steals a book title and then you got it from me, but The Protest Psychosis, How Xenophobic Bigotry Became a White Disease. Xenophobic means you're fearful of strangers or things you don't know. Bigotry, you kind of have a ignorant prejudice against some people. And so now that's going on in the supremacist psychosis. And so now really it's a white disease because not many other people act like that. So let's go ahead and break this down, looking at some books so we can conclude here. So let's look at some books. So I have a little small book. It's a guy named Sam Harris with a book called Lying. He's actually a philosopher, background in neuroscience, but just simple. People lie to others. People lie so that others will form beliefs that are not true. So that's what's happening with the media and the governmental structure. They lie and they know it's not true, but it's again about controlling things. So what lies, it says, lies are the social equivalent of toxic waste. Everyone is potentially harmed by their spread. That's why you can't trust the media because, again, they're controlled by the corporate folks who want to continue to control things and keep things in order. So NBC, CNN, Fox, Washington Post, whatever the media source, they're controlled by someone who wants to push a narrative. You say someone might be assholes. Assholes, a theory. It's by Aaron James. He's in philosophy. So you have people who are philosophers that are trying to break things down to describe this, what's going on in society. But I'm describing the supremacist psychosis. What is an asshole? It can be ultimately make peace not only with the given asshole, but also with a human social condition in which assholes flourish. So that's why he's writing this book, to figure out how to resolve this problem about dealing with assholes. He says he systematically allows himself to enjoy, that is an asshole, systematically allows himself to enjoy special advantages in interpersonal relations out of an entrenched sense of entitlement that immunizes him against the complaints of other people. That's what's happening with people who run our government. The asshole acts out of a firm sense that he is special, that the normal rules of conduct do not apply to him. He may not deliberately exploit interpersonal relations, but simply remains willfully oblivious to normal expectations. Because the asshole sets himself apart from others, he feels entirely comfortable flouting accepted social conventions almost as a way of life. Most important, he lives this way more or less out in the open. He stands unmoved when people indignantly glare or complain. He is, quote, immunized, unquote, against anyone who speaks up, being quite confident that he has little need to respond to questions about whether the advantages he allows himself are acceptable and fair. Indeed, he will often himself feel indignant when questions about his conduct are raised. That, from his point of view, may show that he is not getting the respect he deserves. You got reporters asking the commander-in-chief questions, and he's like, "What about you?" That's an asshole who can't respond to the question at hand. So, from lying to assholes to bigotry, the bigot, why prejudice persists, by Stephen Eric Bonner. So Bonner is actually a political scientist. So there are a few passages in here I think are really relevant to what's going on with the politics of 2025. Let me read a little bit to you. It says, this book is intended to help educate the bigot's enemies. So for us to understand how you deal with bigots, not so much just to describe what a bigot is. But the bigot always directs his hatred against those who threaten or might threaten his privileges, his existential sense of self-worth, and the imaginary world in which he was once at home. The bigot is a prisoner of his prejudices. I think this now comes down to a psychological imprint on people's biology, which means we're talking about epigenetics. I'll conclude when we talk a little about epigenetics here to say that there's a psychotic state that is passed on from people over generations. It says, he validates himself by employing myths, stereotypes, and double standards. Conspiracy fetishism is always appealing. He is unwilling and unable to engage those who question his opinions or challenge his self-styled superiority. The less he understands the dynamics of modern life, the more insecure he becomes, and the more fanaticism becomes an option. So watch how white people are engaging in this discussion about societal issues like death and who's the enemy. Almost by definition, the bigot's prejudice is hostile, destructive, and malignant. It crystallizes myriad forces that are learned, unconsciously and conscious, and then internalized. More is involved here than an individual with his particular psychological problem. So I'm saying this now goes into the genes. It's like fixated in people's mindsets. So for us to make sense out of this supremacist psychosis, what's going on mentally? For all the bluster, the biggest ego is extremely fragile. We see it from the White House every day, don't we? Perhaps that explains why he is happiest in a fascist or authoritarian regime. People are now desiring for a dictator. You have to scratch your head on that. Once the beneficiary of social privilege, the bigot now views himself as a loser or as a winner under siege. So that's what's happening. So a white man kills a white man now. Oh, they're attacking us. So now you want to go after brown people. When it's a white people problem. Imaginary events are used to indict entire races, religions, nationalities, or gender groups. The bigot's need for excuses is unending. It is always about him and never about his victims. What the subaltern endured is irrelevant. It's time to move on and get over it. That's why I don't want to talk about slavery. That happened in the past. The bigot has heard enough whining about gringos, slavery, and Holocaust, and the rest. So they then go crazy when you want to talk about it because it's still relevant today. People getting advantages off of what happened from the past, but nah, let's not talk about that. He has little use for notions of reciprocity. His only real concern is with maintaining his superiority and finding a creative alibi for his failings. Again, supremacist psychosis. Like the Klansman and the Nazi, he can appear as elitist and populist simultaneously. The bigot can shift his views so easily because ultimately he has no views, only interests and prejudices that are mutually reinforcing, and that's why the media becomes complicit, because they allow this to flourish and go on. Words wound, but policies wound even more. So someone espoused about getting shot or violence should be had and is okay, and they were taken out. Prejudice is not confined by what people feel or say, but by what they actually do. It has an economic as well as a cultural and political dimension. That is especially true today, given the opportunities for camouflage provided the bigot by the mass media and political establishment. So the mass mind manipulation is on full display. So, profound book that I have from a husband-wife team, Sultan Latif, Naima Latif, and I think the brother has since passed, but slavery, the African-American psychic trauma. Psychic trauma. People experience trauma and it impacts how they deal with people, how they operate in life. So, we might need to look at the Supremacist Psychosis and the European or the white mentality in psychic trauma. So we need to start now looking at that, investigating rather than talking about African Americans and trauma. Look at the state of the Europeans in trauma. People have written books. This is called epigenomic awareness. It's really talking about black mental health, like the epigenetic problems that happen in black people's experience. This is by a brother named Vincent Cook and Skylar Webb. So it just came out, but there's more to looking at epigenetics rather than looking at African people. We need to start looking at how the European mindset is creating this supremacist psychosis, causing us to try to make sense out of these odd scenarios that are existing in life. So there's something going on mentally where people really are acting crazy, and they're acting crazy because they have a false sense of reality. Lastly, there's a book I've talked about often by Christine Keneally, just a journalist, but as a journalist, she's looking at how DNA and history shape our identities and our futures. So the book title is called The Invisible History of the Human Race. Wrote this in 2014, but I found it interesting because there's a part in here that really talks about trust and how there's certain groups of people who don't trust one another anymore. And when we say groups of people, we're talking about those who sold their ancestors into slavery. So I'm going to read a passage from a chapter that deals with ideas and feelings because it sheds light on some epigenetic issues that have been passed on from generation to generation, dealing with trust. But we also want to look at on the psychotic level what may be happening to Europeans, where they have generations upon generations of feeling supreme when they really aren't. So when he was a graduate student, this guy named Nathan Nunn read about Olodu Equiano. And we know about his story because he's one of the slaves who documented what happened when he was taken. Olodu Equiano's life and Sigismund Coelho's account of slavery, and was stunned by the number of first-person reports about friends and families selling one into slavery. Almost 20% of slaves had been betrayed by people to whom they were close. He began to wonder what kind of long-term impact such betrayal might have. Then one day he met someone who had been asking the same question, but for different reasons. Nunn gave a presentation about his slave data, and afterwards a man named Leonard Wachakon introduced himself. Wachakon grew up in Benin, that's in Africa, one of the countries that was most impacted by the slave trade. Nunn's ideas how the trade affected modern economies as an economist deeply resonated with Wachakon's own experience, who believed that trust was an important part of this story. In short, Nunn and Wachakon examined this Afrobarometer, so they were looking at how they can measure this societal issue and trust. It says, a survey that measures public attitudes to different aspects of African daily life, like democracy, employment, and the future of citizenship. It is comparable to a Gallup poll, and it includes 17 countries. The researchers found that overall people tended to have more trust in those who were closer to them, for example, friends over government officials. This was a universal pattern, but it was also this case that the groups that were most exposed to the slave trade over 100 years ago were also the groups with the lowest levels of trust today. In short, people who automatically distrusted others were probably more likely to do well, or at least to not be enslaved. Wariness would also have been smart strategy to teach the next generation. So, as we conclude, for us to make sense out of this crazy supremacist psychotic thinking, they're doing whatever they can to survive. You know, our great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing spent her lifetime trying to dissect what's going on with the white mentality in order for there to be some justice in society. So we must read, we must study. We cannot just let the media tell us what to think. You have to have alternative views. You have to go to sources that are going to give you a chance to think, not give you the great milky white way of looking at the world. So, no matter your ethnicity, no matter where you live in the world on this planet, we must try to make it better by understanding the dynamics, more than likely psychological dynamics, of why people do what they do. So that's what we do here at the Learning Channel. Thank you for turning, and we will be in contact and having more discussion later on.